Complaining is a slow poison that paralyzes your ability to act. 2,000 years ago, the Roman military operated on a system designed specifically to neutralize this poison. They did not try to suppress complaints through positive thinking or mindful breathing. They viewed vocalizing frustration as a literal drain of combat energy, replacing it with a three-part framework of Severitas, Aequanimitas, and Industria. The curiosity is that the Romans never treated a complaint as an emotion to be managed, but as a physical resource being improperly spent. That feeling when you realize you just spent 20 minutes venting about your day, your throat tight, your energy entirely gone, and absolutely nothing in your life has changed. To understand why this Roman system works, we have to look at what happens when you try to do it the modern way. And today, the story of Amber Harris will prove it to you. The overhead fluorescent lights in the break room of the Indianapolis Dental Clinic buzz with a low, constant hum that seems to vibrate right behind the eyes. Amber Harris sits at the small rectangular table, her 29-year-old shoulders hunched forward under the weight of her pale blue scrubs. The air smells faintly of mint fluoride and the sharp, sterile bite of autoclaved instruments. Against the far wall, a coffee maker drips a dark sludge into a pot that has been burning for 3 hours. The vinyl upholstery on the chairs is cracked and peeling, leaving foam exposed at the corners, a perfect monument to a space nobody cares to fix. Amber stares down at her phone, her thumbs hovering over the keyboard, her jaw clenched tight. On the table beside her, a stapled lunch sits a thick notebook with a glossy cover that reads Dental Hygiene School Prep. The pages inside are pristine, completely blank except for the first 3 lines of a pros and cons list written 8 months ago. Amber wants out of the grinding cycle of plaque and bleeding gums, out of the tiny operatories, where she spends 8 hours a day staring into the open mouths of ungrateful patients. She wants to move up, to teach, to design curriculum, to do anything that feels like a forward trajectory. Yet the artifacts of her ambition remain perfectly preserved in their unused state, collecting dust beside the industrial sink. She has tried to break the cycle using every modern tool available. Her phone is a graveyard of abandoned self-improvement apps. There is a habit tracker with a broken streak, a meditation app she opened exactly twice, and a screen time monitor that only succeeds in making her feel guilty. Last month, she bought into a popular online hack known as the Complaint-Free Challenge. The rules were simple. You wear a purple rubber band on your wrist. Every time you complain, you snap the band and switch it to the other wrist. The goal was 21 days without a complaint. In reality, it became a mechanism of self-torture. Amber remembers standing in the aisle of the grocery store, the rubber band tight on her left wrist. A stranger blocked the aisle with their cart, staring blankly at the cereal boxes. Amber muttered under her breath about how people are so oblivious. She snapped the band. The sharp sting of pain only amplified her frustration. She swapped the wrist. By the end of the first day, her wrists were red and raw. By the end of the third day, she had snapped the band so many times that the cheap silicone snapped in half. She did not become complaint-free. She simply became hyper-aware of how miserable she was, and now she had the physical welts to prove it. The failure of the purple rubber band hack was not an isolated incident. It was just the latest in a long line of modern solutions that treated her complaints as a habit to be suppressed rather than a signal to be answered. Lying in her cramped apartment at night, listening to the neighbor's television, bleeding through the thin drywall, Amber stares at the ceiling and reaches the quiet, devastating conclusion that maybe she just does not have what it takes. Maybe the people who succeed are just built differently, wired with a resilience she lacks. She curls deeper into her blanket, the blank notebook on her nightstand a silent accusation. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the catalyst arrives. Denise, the clinic manager, drops a set of car keys on the break room table and tells Amber she needs to drive across town to Walt's Dental Supply and Instrument Repair. They need a replacement suction valve before the first patient on Wednesday. Amber sighs. But the keys are sitting there on the table, offering a brief escape from the clinic walls. The storefront sits on a quiet street in an older part of Indianapolis, far removed from the sterile corporate parks where the clinic operates. Amber pushes open the glass door, a small brass bell ringing overhead. The interior of Walt's shop is a stark contrast to the bright, chaotic clinic she left behind. The lighting is warm, tinged with a soft amber glow over rows of meticulously organized instrument trays and glass display cases. There is no background music, no television, no fluorescent buzz. The air smells of oiled steel and old wood, with a faint trace of leather from the tool rolls hanging on the wall behind the counter. It feels less like a retail shop and more like a craftsman's study, a sanctuary of order and deliberation. Behind the counter stands Walt. He is somewhere in his 60s, with thick forearms and a posture that holds perfectly vertical, as if his spine were made of steel rebar. His hands are large and calloused, currently resting flat on the glass countertop around a disassembled ultrasonic scaler. He does not look up when she enters. He does not fidget or reach for a phone. He simply exists in the quiet space, fully present with the machine in front of him. Amber walks to the counter and drops the requisition form next to his work. She does not just ask for the part. She fills the silence. She complains about the drive, about the rain, about Denise dumping errands on her at the last minute, about how nobody in the clinic respects her time. She does not even realize she is doing it. It is her default setting, a running commentary on the unfairness of her circumstances. Walt does not move. He does not blink. He simply waits. The silence stretches, thick and uncomfortable, until Amber's voice trails off. She shifts her weight, suddenly aware of how loud she sounds in this quiet room. Walt finally looks up. His eyes are steady and unhurried. He pauses for a long breath before he speaks. He asks her what she is sharpening. Amber frowns, confused. She tells him she is here for a suction valve. Walt shakes his head slightly. He asks again what she is sharpening in her own life. Amber opens her mouth to respond, but the words catch in her throat. She thinks about the blank notebook, the broken rubber band, the endless cycle of grievance and inaction. She has no answer. Consider that question for a moment. What are you sharpening with your days? Are your actions honing an edge, or are you simply narrating how dull the blade has become? Walt reaches beneath the counter and pulls out a small wooden tray. Inside sits a set of 6 hand scalers with dulled tips, alongside a flat ceramic sharpening stone. He slides the tray toward her and tells her to sharpen them while he locates the valve. Amber stares at the instruments. She is a licensed dental hygienist. She sharpens instruments every single day. But there is something in the way Walt presents the task that makes it feel different, heavier. She picks up the first scaler and the stone. Walt tells her she will not speak while she works. Then he disappears into the back room. The rhythmic scraping of metal on ceramic fills the silence. Amber draws the dulled curette across the stone at a precise angle, the exact motion she has performed thousands of times, but without the distraction of her own voice. The work feels different. She feels the vibration travel up through her fingers into her wrist. She notices the slight wobble in her stroke, the inconsistency of her pressure. After 10 minutes, Walt returns. He watches her for a moment, then speaks in a low, unhurried voice. He explains that the Romans did not complain about the weight of the stone. They understood that a complaint is an illusion of effort. It tricks the mind into feeling as though it is working, when in reality it is only leaking energy. He introduces the first pillar, Severitas. It means strictness, but not the cruelty we associate with the word today. It is the strictness of focus, the absolute refusal to let the mind be pulled into the mud of grievance. He points to her hands. He tells her the angle is inconsistent because her mind is still in the break room. He tells her to sharpen only the edge that is in front of her, not the one she imagines she deserves. Back in the clinic on Wednesday, she is seated in operatory 3, scaling the tartar off the molars of a particularly difficult patient who keeps jerking his head and complaining about the cold water. The suction tube clogs. Amber feels the familiar heat rising in her chest, the urgent need to turn to the dental assistant and vent about how impossible this patient is. It is a reflex born of years of seeking solidarity and shared misery, but she catches herself. She applies Severitas. She recognizes the complaint as an energy leak. She closes her lips, breathes through her nose, and clears the suction tube with a deliberate, silent motion. The patient continues to jerk, but Amber's internal state remains untouched. She does not take on his chaos. She focuses strictly on the angle of her curettes against the tooth. She feels a brief, electric surge of power. She has won a battle she usually loses. However, the victory is fragile. By Thursday, Amber is exhausted. Suppressing the complaints feels like holding a beach ball underwater. It requires immense, constant effort. She returns to Walt's shop under the pretense of needing more scalar oil. But really, she is there because the quiet room is the only place she feels stable. She tells Walt that staying silent only makes the frustration build up inside, a pressure cooker with no valve. Walt nods slowly. He takes the scalar oil from the shelf and places it on the counter. He tells her the pressure builds because she is only closing the valve. She is not redirecting the steam. He introduces the second pillar, Aequanimitas, equanimity. It is not about becoming a stone. It is about recognizing that external events are not attacks against you. They are simply weather. You do not complain about the rain. You build a roof. Amber struggles with this. She returns to the clinic and tries to view the difficult patients and the broken equipment as weather. But it feels like a mental trick, a clever reframing that does not change the reality of her sore hands and her empty bank account. She is missing the final component, the one that turns philosophy into reality. The following week, she arrives at the shop and finds Walt at his workbench, hunched over a complicated repair on a dental chair hydraulic system. The tools are laid out in a perfect line beside him. He is moving with a slow, deliberate precision, each action flowing into the next without hesitation. Amber watches him for a long moment. She asks him how he never seems to get frustrated with the broken machines. Walt does not look up from the hydraulic valve he is cleaning. He tells her she is still treating the complaint as an emotion to suppress. He introduces the third pillar, Industria, industry, diligence, productive action. The Romans understood that the mind cannot be trusted to think its way out of a complaint. It must act its way out. When the impulse to complain arises, it must be immediately replaced by a micro-action, a single visible step forward. He points to a box of unorganized instrument tips on the back shelf. He tells her to sort them by type and size. No talking, just sorting. Amber hesitates, then walks to the shelf. As she sorts the small metal tips into their designated bins, she notices something strange. The impulse to complain still arises, but the physical action of sorting gives the energy somewhere to go. The frustration does not disappear. It is transmuted into motion. This Roman framework is not merely a philosophical preference. It is mapped directly onto the biology of the human brain. When a person complains, the amygdala fires, activating the sympathetic nervous system and pushing the body into a state of mild stress. Vocalizing the complaint releases a small hit of cortisol and dopamine, creating a temporary sense of relief or bonding. This reward reinforces the neural pathway. The brain learns that complaining is an effective strategy for emotional regulation. Over time, the threshold for triggering a complaint lowers. The person becomes a victim of their environment, constantly reacting to external stimuli with verbal resistance. The Roman method of Industria bypasses this circuit entirely. By forcing the body into a physical microaction, the prefrontal cortex is engaged. The motor cortex takes over. The brain shifts from a passive emotional state to an active executive state. The neural pathways associated with grievance are starved of attention, while the pathways associated with agency are strengthened. The brain literally rewires itself for resilience through movement, not through thought. 3 months pass. The Indianapolis autumn sets in. The sky is turning a permanent flat gray. Amber has transformed her immediate environment. She no longer stands in the break room complaining about the burnt coffee. She simply makes a new pot. She no longer vents about the sharp edges of the dental chairs. She wraps them with tape. Her actions are small, but they are visible. She has filled 10 pages of the notebook with concrete steps for her hygiene school application. Yet she is still failing. She has mastered the art of not complaining about the small things, but the heavy ambition still eludes her. She is sharpening the instruments, but she is not building the practice. She arrives at Walt's shop on a Saturday morning, her hands trembling with suppressed frustration. She tells him she is doing everything right. She is silent, she is active, but she is still stuck in the same job, in the same city, with the same future. Walt looks at her, his expression unreadable. He tells her she is still treating the symptoms, not the disease. He says she has built a fortress, but she has forgotten to lay siege to the enemy. Before Amber can ask what he means, a sharp disruption shatters the quiet of the shop. The front door bangs open. Denise strides into the shop, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. Amber stands frozen. She does not know how Denise found her here, or why her manager is tracking her down on a Saturday. Denise drops a thick stack of manila folders onto the glass counter with a heavy thud. She tells Amber that the new charting software crashed overnight. All of Amber's patient notes from the last 2 weeks are gone. The dental records need to be manually re-entered from the physical files before Monday morning, or the clinic faces a massive compliance violation. Amber stands frozen. The air in the shop feels thick. A tight, constricting band wraps around her chest. Her heart beats hard against her ribs. She looks at the towering stack of folders, each one representing an hour of tedious, unpaid data entry. She thinks of her weekend, her plans to finally draft her application essay. The resource she lacks is brutally clear: time. She does not have the hours required to rebuild the work that was lost. Denise stares at her, waiting for a response. Amber opens her mouth. She promises she will get it done. She says she will come in tonight and fix it. But as the words leave her lips, they ring hollow in the silent room. Denise's eyes narrow slightly. Amber realizes the terrible irony of her situation. For a year, Denise has listened to Amber complain about the charting system, about the long hours, about the broken clinic. Amber's history of vocal complaints has emptied her promises of any weight. Denise does not believe her because Amber has proven herself to be a person of words, not of action. The rain hits the pavement outside Walt's shop in thick, heavy sheets. Amber pushes through the door, her scrubs soaked through, her chest heaving. The brass bell rings violently, shattering the quiet of the room. Walt stands at the counter, wiping down a set of extraction forceps. He does not look up. Amber drops the stack of manila folders onto the glass counter, the wet paper slapping against the surface. She tells him she cannot do it. She says the system does not work for real problems. She says Denise does not believe her. The clinic is falling apart, and she is going to lose her job over a software crash she had nothing to do with. The words pour out of her, a torrent of panic and grievance that has been building for months. Walt sets the forceps down. He rests the cloth on the counter. He looks at her, his eyes completely still. He tells her, "This is the real war." Amber stops. She stares at him. Walt says the broken software is not the war. The war is the voice in her head that wants to narrate the injustice instead of fixing the problem. He tells her panic is noise. Purpose is silent. He asks her what she is sharpening. The question hits her like a physical blow. The pivot question from their first meeting echoes in the damp air of the shop. She realizes the answer. She was not sharpening anything. She was just surviving, waiting for the next inconvenience to vent about. The crisis has answered the question she could not answer before. Her ambition was a fantasy because it lacked the weight of real purpose. Walt points a thick finger at the wet folders. He tells her to go back to the clinic. He tells her to enter the charts. He tells her she will not speak to anyone about it. She will just do the work. The clinic is a tomb at midnight. The overhead lights in the break room are turned off, leaving only the dim bluish glow of the desktop monitor on the reception desk to illuminate the space. Amber sits in the rolling chair, the vinyl cold against her damp scrubs. The air conditioning has been shut off for the night, and the silence is absolute, broken only by the low hum of the server tower under the desk and the rhythmic tapping of the keyboard. The physical environment she usually wants to escape feels different now. It is not a prison. It is a workshop. The stack of manila folders looms to her left, and the empty database blinks on the screen to her right. She pulse-folds the first folder and opens it. The impulse to reach for her phone is overwhelming. The urge to text a coworker, to post about the injustice of unpaid overtime, to find someone to validate her misery, claws at her throat. But she applies Severitas. She closes her lips. She directs her focus strictly to the physical reality in front of her. She types the patient's name. She tabs to the next field. She types the chart number. Each keystroke is a small, deliberate action. The inner furnace of strict focus drives her hands. She finishes the first chart and moves to the second. The small win registers quietly in her mind. The first folder goes into the completed pile. It is tangible evidence that the system is working. Then, halfway through the fourth chart, the resistance surges. The old voice returns, loud and insistent. It tells her this is unfair. It tells her she is wasting her life entering data while her peers are out living. It tells her she deserves a break, a moment to complain, just one quick text. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. The silence of the clinic feels oppressive. She remembers Walt's words. Doing is replacing the complaint with action. Being is letting the complaint become your identity. She has spent years being a complainer. It was her identity in the break room, her bond with her coworkers. To abandon it feels like shedding a layer of skin, but she forces her fingers back to the keys. She types the next line. Every action is a vote for the new identity she wants to claim. Every silent keystroke is a ballot cast against the old Amber. She does not feel triumphant. She feels the grinding friction of a brain rewiring itself against its instincts, but she keeps typing. The pile of completed folders grows. The clock on the wall ticks past 2 in the morning. She does not stop. 3 weeks later, the crisis is a memory. The charts were entered on time. The compliance violation was avoided. There was no parade, no dramatic thank you from the clinic management. There was only the quiet relief of a disaster averted through cumulative, silent action. Amber stands in the break room, pouring a fresh cup of coffee from the newly made pot. Denise walks in, holding a stack of patient schedules. Denise pauses at the coffee machine. She looks at Amber, her eyes scanning the young hygienist's face. There is a subtle shift in Denise's posture. The usual guardedness is replaced by something else. She tells Amber the charts were perfect. She says she knows Amber stayed late, and she appreciates that Amber did not make a fuss about it. It is a simple acknowledgement, but it carries the weight of quiet respect. Amber nods, taking a sip of her coffee. She realizes the missing piece of the puzzle. The urgency argument was never about the external deadline. It was about the why. She had been trying to stop complaining just to be less miserable, which was not a strong enough purpose. The crisis gave her a real why. She had to protect her livelihood, her future, her chance at hygiene school. The complaint was a signal that a boundary had been breached, and Industria gave her the tool to reinforce it. Later that week, she stops by Walt's shop. He is organizing a shelf of handpieces. She tells him the charts are done. Walt nods, barely glancing at her. He tells her the external urgency will fade. The broken software is fixed. The temptation to slip back into old habits will return the moment the pressure disappears. He tells her the system only works if she applies it when nothing is burning. 6 months pass. The crisis is long over. Normal life has returned to the Indianapolis clinic. The rhythm of scaling and root planing has resumed its monotonous pace. It is a Tuesday afternoon, and Amber's 3 o'clock patient has just canceled. She has an unexpected hour of free time. The break room calls to her. She can hear the muffled voices of the other hygienists through the drywall, complaining about the new insurance policies, complaining about the weather, and complaining about the slow trickle of patients. The sensory temptation is acute. The break room is warm. The chairs, though cracked, are familiar. The camaraderie of shared misery is a powerful, comforting drug. It would be so easy to walk down the hall, drop into a chair, and join the chorus. It would feel good. It would feel like belonging. Amber stands in the hallway, her hand resting on the doorframe. She feels the pull of the old life, the seductive comfort of the vent. But then she recalls the legionary teaching. The Roman soldier did not wait for the general to tell him to build the fort. He built it because he was a builder. His identity was forged in the action itself. Amber turns away from the break room. She walks back to Operatory 3. She closes the door. She sits down on the dental stool and pulls her notebook out of her scrub pocket. She opens it to the page where she has been drafting her personal statement for the hygiene school application. She picks up a pen and begins to write. She chooses to work in silence. The psychology of identity formation confirms this exact struggle. Behavioral science demonstrates that identity is not a sudden, dramatic epiphany that strikes like lightning. Identity is built in the silence of routine. It is constructed through the aggregation of micro-decisions when no one is watching. When a person chooses a difficult action over a comfortable habit, the brain experiences a brief period of cognitive dissonance. The old self protests the new behavior. However, if the behavior is repeated, the brain eventually reconciles the conflict by updating the internal self-image to match the new actions. The legionary did not become a builder by thinking about building. He became a builder by laying stones in the rain. Amber is laying stones. The comfort of the break room will always be there, but it no longer fits who she is becoming. 3 years later, the Indianapolis skyline is visible through the large windows of the community college faculty building. Amber Harris stands at the front of a sterile classroom, her posture straight and grounded. She is 27 now, a clinical instructor for the dental hygiene program. Her hands, once sore and tense from gripping the ultrasonic scaler, now gesture with calm authority as she explains the proper angle for subgingival scaling to a room full of eager students. The cracked vinyl and burnt coffee of the old clinic break room are a world away. She revisits her origin not with resentment, but with a strange gratitude. The misery of that old break room was the friction required to sharpen her edge. If she had never reached the breaking point of the purple rubber band, she would never have found the quiet order of Walt's shop. During a break between classes, a fellow instructor named Matthew leans against the doorframe. He watches Amber methodically organize the instrument cassettes for the afternoon lab. He tells her she is the quietest person in the department, but she is always in motion. Amber smiles slightly, sliding a mirror handle into its slot. She knows exactly what he means. She is quiet because she is no longer leaking energy. She is in motion because she has a wall to build. She picks up a dull explorer from the demonstration tray and reaches for the ceramic sharpening stone on her desk. The motion is fluid, precise, and completely silent. She draws the metal across the stone at the exact angle Walt taught her years ago. There is no hesitation. There is no frustration. There is only the sharp, deliberate friction of a blade being honed for purpose. You are still sitting in the chair, watching this story. You are probably feeling the weight of your own break room, your own damp scrubs, your own stack of unentered charts. The frustration that brought you to this video is the same frustration Amber felt when the rubber band snapped. But that frustration is not a flaw in your design. It is a signal. It is the raw, unrefined energy of your own Severitas, trying to escape through your mouth instead of moving through your hands. The Roman system does not ask you to suppress your anger or pretend the world is fair. It asks you to transmute that grievance into a single visible step forward. So, I will ask you the same question Walt asked Amber. What are you sharpening with your days? Drop your answer in the comments below. Tell me the one micro-action you are going to take today to replace your next complaint. If you want to see more systems like this, systems that fuse ancient philosophy with modern brain science to rebuild your life from the ground up, hit subscribe. The fortress is not built in a day. It is built in the silence of your next action.